Well, would you look at that? We have updates. What's going on, you guys? TBR here, back yet again with another King of Fighters All-Star video. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Boss Syndrome wait a second, Habit, sorry. We're going to be talking about the latest in-game patch updates that were posted over on the official forums overnight by CM Yuri. And if you guys want all this information for yourselves, links will be conveniently placed in the description so that they can be there for your reading pleasure once you finish this video. All right, after you finish the video. But before we get into all of that, make sure if you guys haven't already done so, you smash that like button and subscribe if you enjoy daily King of Fighters All-Star content such as this. And let's go ahead and get into the patch updates. So first and foremost, the biggest thing that you guys are going to want to be aware of going into this is that this is going to be a patch and not a maintenance. So as you guys can see here, this patch is going to be applied later on this evening. So you're not going to have to worry about getting all of your dailies done with this. This isn't going to be something where they're going to basically keep you out of the game for any discernible amount of time. So basically, as you guys can see, this is going to be later on this evening that we'll get this patch, and this is going to be the information here that we're going to be going over in today's video. So I just wanted to get that out of the way right off the top here, just so you guys were aware. I know a lot of times we have to get our stuff done early and that sort of thing with these maintenance updates, but this isn't going to be one of those, so you don't got to worry about it, at least from what they say. I always say get your stuff done early regardless, just in case, because you never know, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So next up here, we are going to have the New Year Greetings event final push log and bonus boosting event. Good Lord, work on your titles. But when it comes to this, we are going to be getting a bunch of items dropped directly into our inboxes for about the next week or so, and some of these items are actually really good. So this is going to be starting later on this evening. It looks like right after the patch, so pretty much should have this stuff in your inbox once these buffs go into effect, which we'll be talking about next. But when it comes to the items we're getting here, the biggest thing that you're going to notice first and foremost is that all of these are the same, it looks like. So I don't see any difference from day to day. So it looks like for about the next week or so, looks like about 5 days, we're going to be getting these same items added into our inboxes, which not too shabby, honestly, because we're getting 500 AP and 5 of the New Year Roulette event tickets, which are really, really nice. So in general, this is some pretty nice stuff. You're also going to get auto clear tickets, Element Soul mystery boxes, assorted core selection boxes, and so on and so forth. But really, I think that the big winners here are the AP and the roulette tickets, which is always going to be beneficial, especially when you have a roulette that's this good and also requires you to use your AP. So you can kind of parlay that into getting even more roulette tickets if you want to go ahead and use that AP on the rush dungeon. So in general, not too shabby. I'm liking what I'm seeing here. I definitely appreciate this because I've been grinding this thing pretty hard. So I could definitely use the AP, and in general, not too bad. So that's just going to be some free stuff. The next thing we're going to talk about is of course going to be the main event when it comes to this update, and that is going to be the revamped fighters and package information. Now, the revamped fighters this time around that we are going to be getting, a lot of people already kind of assumed this. I'd already said that this was probably going to happen. This is something I had actually had somebody ask me yesterday in the comments section on yesterday's video, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out, you should. But basically, he had said, or had asked me if I thought that Psyche and Mukai were going to be getting buffed, and I told them, yes, I definitely thought so based on some of the previous data mines that we had seen, and lo and behold, 24 hours later, not even, and we're getting announcements on this. So I guess I'm a prophet. Yay. Anyway, you guys, when it comes to Mukai and Psyche, two things here. When it comes to Mukai is a character that unfortunately never really got his heyday in Global. By the time he dropped in Global, he was really relevant for a couple of weeks, and then after that, he kind of just started falling off in a huge way. He had a much better time on the Korean side of the game for a much longer amount of time just because of kind of the release window there. So unfortunately, Mukai has always been a little bit shafted. Big old stone boy, unfortunately, never got his time to shine, and maybe these buffs will help that? They're not. Spoiler alert. But with Psyche, on the other hand, Psyche ended up actually being a character that was pretty useful for a while. Unfortunately, with Psyche, his biggest issue, and really when it comes to the issues with these characters in general, Mukai is a lot more outdated. Problem with Mukai, honestly, in my opinion, and the thing that is really always going to hold this version of this character back, and I think if you're a Mukai fan, you're better off waiting for a Boss Syndrome version, which I think is probably closer than you might think. Really, the big problem with this character is going to be his animations for PvE. This is a character that really the best I think he could hope for is to be relevant in PvP. I think that's his best shot, to be honest. However, with Psyche's issue, he's a much more recent character, at least relatively speaking, by comparison to Mukai. He's a character, his biggest issue was his damage output in PvE. So this is a character that while he's not too shabby, he needs better damage, and that's his biggest issue. So we're gonna see if they addressed any of this in here. You know, they did in part, but we'll talk about it. But first up here, we're gonna talk about Mukai. So first up, we're going to talk about the skills. And again, they always lay these out so that you can kind of see what the previous version of the effect or the current version as we talk right now of the effects are. And then in red, they're going to have whatever the changes were. So basically going through here on the S1, we have inflicts damage equal to 668% of attack to an enemy with a 20% attack increase for 10 seconds upon usage. Now we are going to have that 20% attack increase for 10 seconds upon usage bumped up to 30%. So we have an extra 10% there. So not bad. And then we also are going to have a whole new line of text here where we're applying blackout, which is your tier 2 version of darkness, for 8 seconds upon landing a skill. So really when it comes to this is pretty nice. Now he no longer just has pretty much his petrify gimmick. He's also going to be able to use darkness as well. So could be good. We'll see. I still have my doubts, but we'll see. So not too bad on the S1 there. That's a nice little buff, but let's keep it going. Now on the S2, here he is going to now have an interrupt, and this interrupt is actually going to be applicable when he is standing or airborne. So basically he is going to be able to use this from the looks of it, and whenever he's in any position other than being laying on the floor on his back. So again, not too bad, and you're going to notice that this was actually conveniently placed on his hyper armor skill. So that is going to make him a little bit more meta, because again, I've always said that a very meta effect in this game is having a hyper armor with interrupt combo on a skill, and now he has that. So pretty nice. It kind of brings him up to snuff in that capacity, at least with some of the current meta. And then finally on the S3, he is now going to be able to petrify the target enemy, including guard, for 2.0 seconds. I don't know why they deemed it necessary to put 2.0, just put 2. It got me thinking about AEW right now, and that's just weird. Anyway, before it was petrifies the target enemy for 1.5 seconds upon landing the skill. So now not only is it going to be able to petrify the target for a longer duration, but you're also going to be able to petrify them while they're in guard stance. So it's going to make it a lot easier to apply that petrify. Petrify, of course, is a very underutilized, very underused CC effect, which Net Marble, if you're listening, use that more. It's pretty darn good and we like it. However, we also have a whole new line of text here with a 70% chance to reset his cooldown upon landing the skill on a cooldown of 15 seconds. So I'm assuming this is basically meaning that it's just going to reset the S3. It's always tough to tell with the way they word these things, because basically sometimes whenever they say this, they will word this, whether it's going to reset one skill or the whole skill set, they word it pretty much the same. So with the wording on this stuff, it's always hard to tell, but I'm going to assume it only resets the S3 for now. But a 70% chance to do so on a cooldown of 15 seconds, pretty standard stuff, so not too bad. Now, that is pretty much going to do it for Mukai's skills. Now we're going to talk about his cores. Now, when it comes to the cores here, first up, we have unique combat style, and there's a few little numerical changes here that end up being pretty darn good. So first up, basically what this does is active skill damage is increased by 30%, whereas before it was at 17% if your health is at 50% or above, and your damage received is decreased now by 50%, whereas before it was at 10%. That's a huge jump if your health is 49% or below. So basically, this is going to give him a lot more staying power. It's going to be making him a lot more tanky. So not too bad. And like I said, this increase to this one here is a huge jump. That's a 40% increase. So we'll have to wait and see again on all this stuff whenever it comes to these buffs, how these characters end up faring. But that's a pretty nice jump. So we'll see. Now, finally, on Battle Instinct, we have a 50% chance to petrify the enemy for, again, 2.0 seconds upon receiving damage on a cooldown of 12 seconds, with an additional effect here of an additional 150% of attack damage applied to the target that is petrified. So there's a couple things here. Basically, Mukai now is going to be able to more reliably petrify things. He's going to be able to petrify things for a longer duration, and he's also going to get a nice additional 150% of attack damage applied to targets that are petrified. So that's really good. He's also going to have a lot more staying power with these cores here. So in general, this is a character that did get quite a bit of help. I'm going to be honest with you guys though, and again, this goes back to what I said earlier about the fact that if you're a Mukai fan, you might be better off waiting for a BS version. I don't necessarily think that this is going to make him anything too crazy. I really don't see that happening. He's definitely not going to be on par with SS and BS characters, but he's definitely going to be in a better spot regardless. So again, time will tell, but that's just kind of my initial takeaways. Now with Psyche here got some help. So we're going to talk about this. So when it comes to Psyche, the biggest thing on the S1 here, the only thing on the S1 here is you're going to see that whereas before his blackout was applied for 6 seconds, now it's 8 seconds. So really there was just a 2-second duration on that blackout duration that was added there, so not much to talk about. However, an extra 2 seconds definitely puts him at the higher end for durations when it comes to dots, so pretty good. Now, next up here on the S2, we are going to have a new line of text here, and this means that we can now use our super armor skill. Big sad, not hyper armor, but whatever. And it can be used while being hit, so it's an interrupt now with airborne. So it's an airborne interrupt, not too bad. I would have liked to have seen hyper armor here instead of super armor. Maybe that could have been part of the buff, but unfortunately not the case. But hey, we'll have to wait and see what else happens for this character. So on the S3, we're gonna have a couple of things here. So whereas before, now this is going to be on the S3, this is something that always made him kind of annoying in PvP especially. And again, I think that this character in general is going to, after we go through all these buffs, going to be a character that's probably going to see his biggest bump in performance in PvP. Not to say that in PvE he isn't going to have some use cases as a budget darkness user. However, we'll see. I'm not seeing, I'm going through here, I don't see anything that's really going to buff his damage enough to make him like top tier for darkness. That isn't going to happen. Again, just like with what I said with Mukai, he's not going to be a BS or an SS character again. And if you're a fan of this character, I think you're probably going to see a BS version of this character sooner rather than later. So you might be better off kind of being patient, but let's see what we got here. So basically, each hit against the target with darkness applied decreases the target's power gauge by 1.8% and increases Psyche's power gauge by 1.8%, whereas before these were both set at 0.6% respectively. So we're basically going to be getting an increase there. It's basically double at that point, so pretty nice on that. But we also have a new line of text. He's increasing his attack damage, there you go, by 28% for 7 seconds upon usage. So there you go. That helps with his damage output. Not too bad. Again, this skill here is very debilitating in things such as PvP. I don't know if any more after these buffs, if this character's still going to be able to make any cracks in the meta whatsoever, based on the fact that before, when he was relevant, he didn't have a bunch of BS and SS and limited banner characters to contend with, but who knows. Now, on the cores, if we take a look here, we're basically going to see the big change here, whereas before on Ruler of Time, it said upon landing an active skill critical hit, they have shaved off this critical hit part, and now he just needs to land an active skill, so that's nice. It makes it a lot easier. However, there's a trade-off. You'll see that this skill is pretty much the exact same, except for the fact that there's now a cooldown of 15 seconds. So to kind of offset the fact that it is going to be much more reliable to land this, they have added a cooldown, and it's a 15-second one. I don't know how well this is going to work in usage versus the way it worked before, to be honest, now that it has this cooldown, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, he does have this big line here. Basically, upon landing, is S1? Zus1. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. The target receives additional 25% damage for 7 seconds and fear for 2 seconds on a cooldown of 12 seconds. So this is big. This is really good for him. So basically what you're seeing here is you're going to be able to see that he is going to have a whole lot more help when it comes to his damage, and he's also going to have fear, and that is going to be very useful for him. So in general, you guys can start to see kind of between this and this one up here, you can kind of see that they are addressing the damage issues with this character. So I'm curious to see how well this ramps his damage output once we get to that point. And I do have this character at Awakening level 50, so I can test that out later once these buffs are live. Now, next up here, we have the final buff to Psyche, which is going to be another core buff, and it's going to be on Crystal of Evil. So basically, receiving damage decreased used to be 35%, now it's 50% when his health was below 50%. So it's a bump up of 15%, not too shabby. But then we get our hyper armor here. So you guys are going to see that he did get hyper armor. So basically, they swapped out the super armor for the hyper armor. So there's where the hyper armor was in this buff. We had mentioned that earlier. And this is applied when hit during bleed, burn, darkness, starlight state on a cooldown of 8 seconds. So a couple things changed here. We got, of course, like I just said, the hyper armor swapped in for the super armor, but we also are now going to be able to get this when we are hit by when we are in a state of darkness and starlight on top of what we were previously able to get our super armor with, which was bleed and burn. So not too bad. It's on a short-ish cooldown of 8 seconds. So this isn't too shabby. I still would have preferred to have seen hyper armor with that interrupt, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, and at the end of the day, if you're a fan of these characters, just be thankful they're buffing them at all. So in general, I definitely think Psyche is the big beneficiary, the big winner here of these buffs. I think this is the character that is going to win out of the two. However, time will tell, but I do think that unfortunately Mukai, he's outside of a rework, he's just in a bad spot. So it just is what it is. There's only so much they can really do at that point. But with Psyche, on the other hand, if you're a fan of Psyche, I think that you're probably going to be very happy, especially if you enjoy Championship. You'll probably be able to get some nice usage out of him there. Now, next we're going to talk about the new packages. So these packages are kind of similar to what we saw with the previous characters that got buffed, and they released these ruby packages that we could pick up with our rubies. And basically you guys are going to see that these are going to be added in with the patch, and they're going to be available for a while, so you have plenty of time. Going through here, so basically we'll just kind of briefly run through, because I'm going to plan on probably just breaking these down on video when it all goes live. But you guys are going to see, you're going to have the ability to pick up the actual characters here. So for 2,500 rubies, you can pick up the actual character, which isn't a bad deal. Maybe Psyche would be worth it. I don't think Mukai would, personally. But you're going to be able to get the souls, you're going to be able to get some assorted core selection boxes, some gold, so on and so forth. So basically that's what you're seeing with these two characters as far as being able to pick them up with rubies. 2,500 rubies isn't terrible for a fess, but they're not, I wouldn't do it. I really don't, especially considering that there's a good chance in the very near future, we're probably going to see boss syndrome versions again of these characters. So now we also have the Awaken support packages, which are basically going to be able to net you the memories for the characters, as well as their respective Element Fest memories. And then you're also going to be able to pick up the Attack, Moon, Nationality Unknown Imprint Stone. I'm not entirely sure what this one's going to have on it, if it's going to be similar or the same as what we saw before as far as effects are concerned, or if it's going to be new. We'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to make any judgment calls on that until I actually see what it is. So yeah, and I don't see anywhere where they confirm that either. So if there is that information out there, somebody can let me know in the comments. Now, next up here, we are going to have the special summon package. Basically, this is going to cost you 1,000 rubies. And you can pick up a multi for the unified banner for the fighters and the cards. For 1,000 rubies, that's not a bad deal, honestly. If you're somebody that is brand new to the game, if you're planning on summoning, pick this up first. Because you're going to be saving yourself a bunch of rubies, especially, like I said, if you're new and planning on spending. Not telling you that you should, but at the same time, if you're going to do it anyway, you probably just want to buy this so you can get kind of a little bit of a discount there on getting a multi for each one of these banners. So, and then we have the Awakening Growth package. So that isn't anything that's too crazy. I really wouldn't recommend that, to be honest with you, for 1,000 rubies. So that's pretty much what we got there. Now we do have a little bit of information in here as far as the system improvements and error fixes. So we're going to go through this briefly. So they fixed an issue where using BS Ash Crazed by the Spiral of Blood special skill, the target is intermittently standing up at the end of the skill. Yeah, that's kind of more of a visual thing, I guess, more than anything. I don't know if that actually necessarily affected the usage of the skill at all, or the viability of the skill, but I had noticed that happen a few times myself. And then they fixed an issue where in the 2002 story mode, you cannot clear Chapter 6, Stage 2 because enemies intermittently do not appear. I didn't realize that was a thing. I'd never noticed that, but nice that they're fixing it. But anyway, you guys, that is what we are getting with the update. Not a whole lot we need to talk about in here outside of that. There's pretty much going to be it. Now, again, this is going to be a patch, and this patch will be applied later on this evening. If you're a fan of either of these characters, congratulations. However, I would still be waiting and saving for the eventual Boss Syndrome versions of either of these, because I think that that is a lot closer than you might realize. But at the end of the day, it's up to you on what you want to do. But that is going to do it for today's video, you guys. I hope you found it informative. Like I said, if you want to read this stuff for yourselves, links will be in the description. As always, if you enjoyed this video and you found it informative, smash that like button and subscribe. And until the next one, I'll talk to you guys then. You all take care. Peace. Oh, before I forget, where the hell is our Boss Syndrome generic memory net marble? Huh? Huh? Was this amateur hour? Is that how we're going to go into 2022? We're just going to start getting stingier? Bunch of jerks.
Continue.